Hi there, and welcome to the inaugural video for this channel. I was wondering what I should do to kick off this venture, what I should talk about, etc, and I picked equipment and commander setup in World of Tanks. This is something I've struggled with, especially with tanks I was unfamiliar with or had to grind through, but now I have a better understanding of the game. After playing it for years, I thought I'd make a sort of guide. That being said, this isn't going to be if you drive this tank you should use this equipment and these skills because it's the best. Not the case at all. You'll be bringing your tanks into all kinds of situations, and you'll be in different situations in the garage as well, especially concerning credits. This video is hopefully going to guide you to choose the correct setup for your purposes. Also note, I'm not going to talk too much about casual play because, let's be honest, a casual player isn't going to come looking for guides on YouTube. Nevertheless, feel free to skip to the part that you think applies to what you're after, and if you feel you're after a slightly different angle, then comment it down below. So, what is the best way to set your tank up? Well, the first part of answering that question comes in answering another question. What's good? Both for you and for the tank itself. By good for you, I mean what is your preferred play style? Do you get in and brawl in close quarters? If you do, you probably want to avoid equipment that improves accuracy because you'll be close enough to hit your targets anyway. Your engagement range will typically be about 200 meters or less. Do you prize camouflage above all and try to stay unspotted for as long as possible so you can get ambush shots off and then quickly retreat to cover before any retaliation? If that's you, you should probably stay away from equipment that improves reload time, if that's your game, because it won't be as helpful. None of these styles are wrong, by the way. They're just different and work better in some tanks than others. The brawler I talked about just now would do well in a heavy tank or a well-armoured medium, but probably not too well in a lightly armoured tank destroyer or light tank, like the Scorpion G, for example. On screen are a few typical examples with ideas for equipment loadouts and commander skills. Note, I haven't put any specific names of equipment or skills in these tables, but rather their effects. This is because there are some skills and modules that do very similar things, and I think it would be better that you choose between those minute differences. Also, I'm sure you're aware that World of Tanks has many different editions: Blitz for mobile, console and PC, and there are skills in there that some exist in some versions and not in others, or they do exist but they're the same name. So I'd rather try and accommodate for all of them in this guide as much as I can. It is worth mentioning at this point that there is one exception to this entire guide. I think it's a single commander skill that should be on every single commander. It's very rare that that's not the case, and that is Sixth Sense. This skill effectively allows you to understand when you've been spotted and allows you to react accordingly. Now, in the mobile version and the PC version, as far as I know, about 3 seconds after you've actually been spotted, a audio prompt and a visual prompt will turn up in the middle of the screen. This is not the case, however, in the console edition, because it appears in the bottom left with a prompt immediately as soon as you're spotted, so it's a little bit better in that edition. As far as I know, I believe it's coming to every commander in the PC version, so this may not be relevant soon. I'm uncertain as of this recording, but nevertheless it is hugely important because it's one of the skills that gives you much more information in battle and allows you to make much more informed decisions when you're fighting. That being said, what's good for the tank? Now, this part of the process is more binary. You should either be in one group or another, and to describe each group I'm going to use an example. Let's say you've purchased a medium tank and are looking to equip it with a crew and equipment slots. Your medium tank has a punchy, fast-firing gun, but conversely, its accuracy is quite poor. So, what to do? Now, the first group would argue that you should equip the tank with modules that improve the accuracy of the gun, allowing for rapid but now more accurate shots. The basis of the argument made by this group is the tank is good in some areas, bad in other areas, so let's buff up the bad areas and make it a good all-rounder and an overall better machine. In this example, the effective range of the tank would increase because your accuracy is increased, which means you can hit lower plates, commander's hatches and other weak points from further out. And then depending on how your accuracy is improved specifically, I'm talking about either dispersion values or your decreasing aim time, then it may be better at either snapshotting or sniping than it usually would be without it. But the second group would argue that you should fit modules and apply skills that increase the fire rate even more. Unlike the first group, this second group accepts that the tank will have weaknesses and chooses to increase its strengths further, putting the tank further ahead in that aspect specifically. So for this example, the tank would fire even faster than its already above standard rate, and its accuracy will remain essentially the same bad value, and depending on the specific tank you are applying this to, you might be ready to reload before you fully aimed again. So technically your accuracy would go down because you're not fully aimed by the time you're ready to fire again. So, but that doesn't apply to every single tank you do this to. Both approaches in this respect can be right, both groups. They're both logical assumptions. As such, you can't really be wrong, and you can even sort of go half and half. There are some instances where the tank is terrible or great at everything anyway, so there's no outstandingly good or bad stats that you need to improve, and on top of that, it can be difficult to decide which aspect of the tank to improve. A tank may have good view range as well as good fire rate, or bad maneuverability and bad accuracy. You only have a limited number of slots, so it's up to you to choose which aspects to improve, really. I would suggest that when you make this choice, look at what links back to your playstyle and what do you think you'll be spending your games in this tank doing most of the time. So, with that in mind, you need to think about what you want to accomplish within your games. Now, I've thought about this for a bit and come up with 3 main reasons why you should want to improve a tank's performance. And they are: improve your overall win rate, the most obvious, either across your profile or in the tank itself, to grind marks of excellence for the tank, or improve the grind of the tank, as in progressing it to the next module or vehicle in the tech tree. I'm going to address each one and then talk about the better setups for each. It is worth noting material in this section will kind of get a bit contradictory as relative to what I've said in earlier parts, especially when I talk about marks of excellence. There's no specific and commander setup that is the best, but there is definitely a more efficient way of completing your goals. So let's talk about the first reason, improving your win rate. For this objective, you want to think about how you can best serve your team in battle to get the win. Now, before you go in the comments and say, hold on, how is my equipment setup and skills going to give me a chance at winning the games where we lose 10 tanks in the first 3 minutes? I'm going to head you off at the pass and hit you with a sad truth. Unfortunately, there's nothing you can do about it, really. These games just happen. You're just going to have to accept that. The way this game works, I'm talking about hit points. If your team loses tanks and HP immediately, getting into position in the early game, you'd have to get extremely lucky in order to win. And we're talking either multiple ammo racks or fires, or getting some serious condensed firepower down one flank so you can even the scales. Each team has roughly the same damage output at the start of the battle, and roughly the same amount of hit points And if your team loses guns, the damage output goes down, and it gets to the point where enemy heavy tanks who still have their health just drive at you, take your hits because of your lower damage output, because it's just you, and still have the health remaining. They just steamroll you and your remaining allies. It's just what happens sometimes. It's the way the game works. You can't control your teammates, and they just might get unlucky. But spotting when that happens, I would say, is a good skill. It won't improve your win rate all that much, but you can reposition and squeeze a bit more damage and XP out than you otherwise would in these games. To that end, though, I would also add that the average World of Tanks player hits roughly a 50% win rate. 30 people enter a battle, 15 have to win, 15 have to lose. Some of the best players in the game have a win rate of 60%, which means every 10 games they're pulling out one more win than the average player. You're going to get games where there's no chance of winning, but every so often in the game it will come down to your actions to win. I'm not talking about clutch 1v5 Kolobanovs, lucky ammo racks on top tier heavies. I'm talking about spotting a pair of sneaky medium tanks making a flank, getting into a better hold down spot before your enemies, tracking a camping tank destroyer that was spotted, allowing your team to get some damage off so it can't peek again. You may not realise it at the time, but your actions may be what allow your team to win. But as far as equipment and commander skills are concerned, you really need to dig into how you can optimise your battlefield impact. Play a good tank, or a tank that resonates with your playstyle, as we discussed earlier, and then choose which group you fit into, buffing strengths or countering weaknesses, and then equip it as necessary. The key to winning engagements is to understand what your tank does well and then not so well, and then try and cater the engagement so you have an unfair advantage over your opponents. So on to the next part of the video, which we were discussing marks of excellence, those small stripes or stars you see on the barrels of some tanks in your games. You can obtain these by doing damage. That's either raw damage, tracking damage, or spotting damage. The official measurements for getting 1, 2, or 3 marks of excellence are as follows. To earn 1 mark of excellence to display on your gun, the average damage caused by you and the average damage caused with your assistance must be higher than the results of 65% of players in this vehicle over the past 14 days. For the second and third mark, the average must be higher than the results of 85% and 95% of players in the vehicle in the past 14 days, respectively. In English, that means you need to be in the top 35% for average damage in your tank in the last 2 weeks to get 1 mark, top 15% for 2 marks, and top 5% for 3 marks. A lot of either platform you do this on will give you a indicator for how far along the standings you are, so you don't need to calculate it yourself. But with that in mind, I have a suggestion for equipment and commander skills regardless of what tank you are driving. I would suggest above all that you prioritise view range. Put as much resources as you possibly can into increasing it. And then once you've upgraded that as much as you possibly can, improve your fire rate, or otherwise known as your damage per minute. This is because your objective is to deal as much damage as possible in all its forms, but marks of excellence differ in respect to what you're trying to do within the game. You aren't trying to win, you aren't trying to get the most kills, you're trying to deal the most damage relevant to other people who are playing your tank. Let's use another example. I want to get a mark of excellence on my T-34, Tier 5 Soviet medium tank. I see that it has poor view range and good damage per minute. So I, as per the suggestion, equip the T-34 so its view range is the highest it can possibly be, and then sync any remaining slots of equipment or skills into damage per minute. Now, in the context of the battle, the view range is now slightly above average because of the stat benefits, but it's not going to be much better than the view ranges of other tanks as standard. So I believe the M4 Sherman, the Polish medium tank, the Swedish medium tank, and a couple of heavies at Tier 5 have better view range as standard. Not by much, but they are nevertheless better. So in the context of the battle, you will have in your T34 a slightly above average view range and obviously fairly decent DPM, which comes as standard. So in the context of the battle, that's your situation, but in the context of the Mark of Excellence tables, you will have an advantage over other people in the rankings because your T34 is better at spotting and has heightened DPM. So it's better in those respects over other players who have elected not to use these equipment slots and commander skills, either knowingly or unknowingly, on the Mark of Excellence tables. But why would you want to improve view range and damage per minute overall? Why not use the previous section and play to the tank's strengths? I would argue that only in exceptional cases should you consider not maximising view range and damage per minute. For example, if you're trying to get Mark of Excellence on the E25, you should definitely sink some resources into boosting its ridiculous camouflage value. For the most part though, you want to be doing two things: spotting, doing damage. You do that by getting forwards, surviving as long as you can, and shooting as often as possible. I'm not going to cover how your gameplay itself should change if you're solely interested in Marks of Excellence. That will probably be in another video, but here we're focused on equipment and skills. In grinding multiple tanks at a third mark, I have noticed that boosting the view range is the most important factor by far. Along with your damage, you'll rack up approximately 1,000 to 2,000 spotting damage per game at higher tiers, because you're just getting forwards, catching out those slower tanks, getting into position so your teammates can get some early shots off, and then in the mid game, if you're forwards, you're going to be prioritized for getting the spotting damage for people supporting your combat, and then towards the end, you'll be able to pick out targets from further away, and then obviously your damage per minute will give you a little bit more combat effectiveness when you get into those engagements. And what this extra spotting damage does, it gives you a little extra boost in the tables when you go up. So when you have a really good result, you go that little bit further because you've got an additional bit of spotting damage. And if you get unlucky, if artillery takes you out in one hit, or you fall off a cliff or something like that, it does happen sometimes. It gives you a sort of cushion when you go down, so you don't fall down the rankings as far, so you don't have to spend multiple games getting back to where you were. Some notes about Marks of Excellence: you can't get them on tanks tier 4 or lower. You can't get them at all in World of Tanks Blitz as of this recording. Once you reach a Mark of Excellence threshold in your damage standing, the marks remain on your barrel regardless of what happens. You can do 0 damage for 100 games. You can sell your tank and buy it again. You will still have the marks on the barrel. However, if you don't play the tank for a while, the game will not retain your damage standing. So for example, if you hit 95%, get your third mark, and then don't play the game for a while, or don't play that tank, your damage standing will start to drop. You will still have the third mark on your barrel, but you would probably be somewhere around 92 to 90%, depending on how long you stay away from it. Also, in the console edition, if you decide to push yourself all the way and do better than 100% of the players driving your tank in the last 2 weeks, you will receive golden gun marks on your barrel, so the decal will turn gold. I'd only recommend doing this in a tank that you really enjoy playing. Don't be fooled. Doing this in an overpowered tank is ridiculously hard because it's overpowered. Everybody does well in it, so the threshold is that much higher. Personally, I've only done it in a Hellcat at tier 6 because I really enjoyed the tank and I felt it was slept on at the time. That being said, we move on to the third reason: improving the grind of the tank. Especially towards later tiers of the game, it can take hundreds of battles to unlock the next tank or part. you need a loadout that will increase your XP gain. I think it would be prudent to mention, if you haven't got a commander with multiple skills already at the later tiers, as it's most likely because you recruited a new commander every time you bought a new tank, you should invest in a skill that boosts commander XP earned. Especially in the higher tiers, you're going to be up against a lot of experienced players who've got multiple skilled commanders, and to close that gap, I would suggest you do this. However, once the commander is skilled to your liking, you essentially throw the commander XP you earn in battle into the ether, and then you have pretty much a useless skill slot. And the only way to respec your commander and change the skills he has or she has is with gold, the premium currency of World of Tanks. So you'd have to spend actual money to change the skills. So just be aware of that. Anyway, the grinding of tanks, especially stock ones, can be a pain. To maximize your XP gain, I would suggest you prioritize kills and hitting higher tier tanks when possible, because both of these grant bonuses to your XP earned in battle, and let's face it, they're the most common things you'll be doing. As far as equipment and skills, I would again consider view range, but not put it above all else, as was the case in Marks of Excellence. It provides a little cushion of XP typically and helps you along, but you should first think about what you'd have to drop to take these skills and equipment. To be honest, if you're driving the tank with suboptimal modules, i.e. not the best ones, you're already at a disadvantage. The most common problem with stock tanks is their lack of penetration. The top gun on the previous tank in the tech tree is usually the stock one, and it just can't compete against tanks one tier higher. You can mitigate this through firing premium rounds, but that can get expensive, especially if you're going to do it over a lot of games. There are equipment options that mitigate penetration drop-off at range, but whether this benefit is worth not taking a different piece of equipment is your decision. Typically, if it was me, I wouldn't bother. I would instead suggest that you take a look at the tank in its best form, or at least the form you intend to grind to the next tank in, and equip it as if you had that set up already. So when you eventually unlock the modules and packages, and equip it in such a way you don't have to spend any extra credits to put new equipment on and get new skills. So, in conclusion, how do you set up your tank? Is one way better than the other? I'd say in some situations, yes, but for the most part, it depends on what you want to achieve with the tank. I think it's difficult to go wrong, really. You have to be actively picking the wrong equipment and skills to make a setup objectively bad. I believe all skills in the garage and all the equipment all have positive effects on your tank. Some obviously better than others, depending on which one, but I don't think there's anyone that has drawbacks. So it's just a question of the combination. I would suggest you just remember this 3-question checklist when you set it up. What is my playstyle? What is the tank good at? And what am I doing in game? With that, you can't really go too far wrong. Thank you all for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you liked it, please consider giving it a like. And if you have a more specific situation you find yourself in, or disagree with any of the points I've made, please leave your take on equipment and skills in the comments. I'd love to discuss it there. I hope to produce more videos like this that talk about key aspects of the game, so if you're interested, consider subscribing. And with all that said, I'll see you in the next one.